What made the simple 81mm steel tube, cradled on a bipod in a frozen Belgian wood, such a lethal and yet utterly vulnerable weapon during the Ardennes winter of 1944? The answer lies not in the trajectory tables of Granite Werfer 34, nor in the explosive weight of its shell, but in a secret duel of physics that stretched from the mud of the fog-shrouded draws of the Battle of the Bulge. German mortar crews believed they had found a loophole in modern war, a way to become invisible. They were catastrophically wrong. The Ardennes offensive, launched in the gray half-light of 16th of December 1944, was built on concealment. German commanders counted on dense conifer forests, deep valleys, and the seasonal marriage of fog and low cloud to ground Allied spotter aircraft. For the infantry's most immediate artillery, the mortar platoons, this weather was a tactical blessing. The German 81mm Granatwerfer 34 and the heavier 120mm Granatwerfer 42, a copy of the Soviet PM-38, could both be manhandled into defilade positions behind a ridgeline, down in a narrow hollow, or on the military crest of a wooded slope. From a reverse slope, the crew saw nothing of their target. A forward observer, linked by field telephone, whispered corrections. A mortar bomb climbs steeply, lofts over the ridge, and plunges almost vertically onto its victim. To the American GI huddled in a foxhole near Elsenborn Ridge or the Losheim Gap, the first warning was a sound like ripping canvas, followed by a black eruption in the snow. The German mortarmen, in contrast, heard only the muted thump of their own tube and the gentle hiss of dissipating propellant gases. They fired smokeless, flash-reduced powder, with no direct line of sight from the target area, no towering muzzle flash, and often under the acoustic blanket of a heavy night. The crews believed they had rendered themselves visually and orally invisible. Their engagement ranges rarely exceeded 4,000 meters, well within the short arc of their curved trajectory, and they assumed that counter-battery fire, the deadly, Allied answer to indirect weapons, demanded a visual fix. They were fighting a war of eyes. Allied science had already moved the contest to an entirely different sensory register. To understand how that loophole was irrevocably closed, one must travel back to 1915, to a stretch of front line southwest of Ypres. There, a 25-year-old physicist seconded to the Royal Horse Artillery, Lieutenant William Lawrence Bragg, who, with his father, had already won the Nobel Prize in Physics for the analysis of crystal structures, was tasked with an impossible problem: locate German batteries hidden behind ridges and in ruins, using only the sound of their firing. The difficulties were immense. An artillery piece produces a violent, broadband shockwave. To the human ear, the sharp crack of high-frequency components provides a sense of direction, but that crack is easily scattered by trees and distorted by wind. The most reliable portion of the muzzle blast, the low-frequency infrasonic wave, travels in a stable, expanding sphere for miles. These pressure oscillations, often below 20 Hz, are literally inaudible. A man cannot hear the infrasound of a distant battery, nor can he discern its bearing. The wave passes through forest and fog with almost mocking indifference. Bragg's breakthrough came through a collaboration with Lance Corporal William Sansom Tucker, an engineer who had been experimenting with fine, platinum wires in the physics laboratories of the University of London. Tucker heated a short length of platinum wire with an electric current until it glowed dull red. When a sound wave struck the wire, the oscillating air molecules cooled it more efficiently than still air, producing a tiny but measurable change in electrical resistance. By running the current through a galvanometer and onto a moving strip of photographic film, Tucker created a microphone, sensitive to the very infrasonic signature that the ear could not perceive. The device, soon known as the Tucker microphone, was encased in a wooden ammunition box, covered with a drum of stretched canvas and buried flush with the ground. A spread of 6 such microphones, placed in a carefully surveyed line several thousand yards behind the trenches, would register the arrival of the infrasonic wave at slightly different times. The film recording, developed in a mobile darkroom, yielded a zigzag trace. Using a simple geometric calculation with the known distance between microphones, the time differences revealed the bearing and range to the source. By 1917, British sound ranging sections could pinpoint German field gun to within 50 meters. A weapon that fired in anger had, unknowingly, signed its own positional confession in a language of air pressure far below the threshold of hearing. When the U.S. Army entered the Second World War, it absorbed the hard-won acoustic lessons of the Great War and industrialized them. The Field Artillery Observation Battalions, specialized intelligence gathering units, each fielded a sound-ranging platoon, equipped with the GR-3C sound ranging set. The principle remained identical: an array of sensitive microphones, now called transducers, placed in a forward line, fed electrical signals back to a central recording station via field wire. But the old photographic film had been discarded. In its place, a set of inked pens traced the pressure wave signatures directly onto a moving paper tape. The paper recorder delivered an instant, real-time graphic of the sound impulse, eliminating the delay of chemical development. A skilled operator could read the paper and plot a hostile battery's position within 3 to 4 minutes of the first shot. For the Ardennes winter, the microphones were moved aggressively forward, often within 3,000 meters of the forward foxholes. The reasoning was both physical and tactical. Mortar tubes, unlike long-range artillery, produce a blast that is dominated by a sharp, higher-frequency pressure spike, but still rich in the long-distance infrasound that Tucker's invention exploited. By halving the distance to the front, the acoustic section dramatically increased the signal-to-noise ratio, allowing them to pick up the distinctive signature of a granatwerfer's muzzle blast even through the muffling curtain of a snowfall. But there was a geometric problem that microphones alone could not fully solve. Mortar shells follow an exceedingly steep parabolic curve. The blast wave arrives at the microphone array from a near-vertical angle, which complicates the bearing calculation, and sometimes produced a shallow, ambiguous fix. To sever the German mortar loophole completely, the Allies needed a second, complementary technology that could physically trace the projectile's flight path backwards. That technology was the SCR-584 radar, a remarkable set developed by the MIT Radiation Laboratory. Originally designed to direct anti-aircraft guns with its conical scanning, microwave frequency beam, the SCR-584 could lock onto a moving target and, through an electromechanical analog computer, automatically track it in azimuth, elevation, and range. In late 1944, Allied fire direction centers began to use the SCR-584 in a novel role: mortar detection. When a German 120mm bomb lifted above the tree line, the radar could acquire the small, shell-sized target and trace its graceful, high-arcing parabola. The trajectory data fed into a predictor which calculated the point of origin, working backward along the projectile's ballistic path. The marriage of sound ranging and radar was devastatingly efficient. An acoustic operator, seated in a half-track laced with field telephone wires, might suddenly see the pens jerk across the paper strip. Muzzle blast, bearing 215 degrees. Approximate range 3,200, he would call out. Simultaneously, a nearby SCR-584 crew, already scanning the sector, would lock onto the climbing bomb and, within seconds, refine that rough bearing into a precise map coordinate. The information was rushed to an artillery fire direction center by voice radio. The loop, from German trigger pull to American shell outbound, could be closed in under 3 minutes. No unit better personifies the arcane craft of acoustic intelligence than the 285th Field Artillery, Observation Battalion. Trained in both flash spotting and sound ranging, its men were a rare breed: mathematicians, surveyors, physicists in uniform. As the German offensive erupted, Battery B of the 285th was moving from the rear into the Ardennes sector, ordered to set up a new microphone base near the threatened front. The column of open-top trucks and jeeps, carrying delicate recording gear and the specially trained technicians, trudged through the narrow, snow-clogged roads. On 17th of December 1944, at the Baugnier crossroads, just south of Malmedy, Battery B's convoy ran headlong into the spearhead of Kampfgruppe Piper, the armored fist of the 1st SS Panzer Division. Outgunned and unable to maneuver, the lightly armed observers surrendered after a brief exchange of fire. What followed was a devastating loss. Approximately 84 unarmed American prisoners were killed at the Crossroads Field, an event that would later be termed the Malmedy tragedy. Among the fallen were men who possessed the finest trained ears in the U.S. Army, experts in the delicate art of interpreting infrasonic whispers. The loss of Battery B was a profound blow. A generation of acoustic specialists, irreplaceable on a battlefield, had been wiped away in a single, treacherous hour. Yet the listening network itself did not collapse. Other batteries of the 285th, along with sound-ranging sections from sister observation battalions, were already emplaced across the northern shoulder of the Bulge. Their microphones remained buried in the frozen soil, their wires still humming with electrical current. Though the men at Malmedy had been silenced, the mechanical ears they had championed continued to feed a relentless stream of positional data to the massed American artillery of V Corps and 16th Airborne Corps. The final act of this acoustic drama was played out around the flickering glow of American campfires. December 1944 was one of the coldest winters in European memory. Soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division, dug in on the Elsenborn Ridge, faced temperatures that froze diesel in the trucks and thickened grease on rifle bolts. To stave off frostbite and exhaustion, men gathered behind the lines, kindling small fires with broken ammo crates and pine boughs. From a distance of 2 or 3 kilometers, through the bare trees and swirling mist, the orange pinpricks of flame were almost impossible to discern with the naked eye. Yet German forward observers, scanning the murk with binoculars or Sturmgewehr scopes, occasionally caught the thermal glow or simple silhouette movement and called in a mortar strike. To the German mortar section, this was a classic target of opportunity. A few rounds from the 120mm tube dropped quickly into the hollow, and the crew would begin the drill of packing up before retaliation. They were confident that their reverse slope position, thick fog, and the short flight time of under 20 seconds would keep them alive. But that very confidence was the bait. The instant the propellant charge ignited, and the 12-centimeter bomb began its upward journey, the infrasonic pressure wave rippled outward from the muzzle at the speed of sound. Within a fraction of a second, it passed over the buried Tucker-type transducers, whose hot platinum filaments cooled momentarily. In the American listening post, the recording pens twitched. Bearing and approximate range were read off the trace. The SCR-584 radar, if within the sector, added its own precise tracking of the ascending shell. The Fire Direction Center already had a pre-computed concentration, plotted on every known reverse slope and draw. An order was barked into a telephone. Fire mission, target Echo 6, VT fuse, 3 rounds, battery 2. What followed was a revolution in killing physics. The American reply came not with delay, whosed shells that would bury themselves harmlessly in soft mud, but with VT proximity fuses, tiny radio transceivers in the nose of each shell that detonated the explosive the moment. The projectile sensed the ground or a solid object within a preset distance. The 105mm and 150mm rounds burst in airbursts. 20 to 40 feet above the German mortar pit. The effect was absolute. The mortar men, who thought themselves invisible, were caught in a steel rain that left no crater to hide in, the invisible shield of reverse slope. Topography and fog had been rendered meaningless by a triumvirate of sciences: the infrasonic ear, the radar eye, and the radio-detonated brain. The German mortar loophole, exploited so effectively in the early days of the offensive, was slammed shut by mid-January 1945. The campfires that dotted the American lines had become an unintentional trap. They did not visually expose the GIs. Rather, they enticed the enemy to speak, and in the new geometry of the unseen battlefield, to speak was to perish. The winter of 1944 marked a fundamental transition in the history of human conflict. For centuries, the artillery duel had been a contest of eyes: flash spotters on towers, balloon observers, forward scouts scouring the horizon for a puff of smoke. The Ardennes proved that the decisive sensory organ was no longer the eye, but the ear, augmented by physics and electronic computation. A mortar squad, invisible to the most powerful field glasses, could be destroyed within minutes by a machine that literally felt the breath of their muzzle. The lineage is direct. The Tucker microphone, first buried in the chalk of Flanders, evolved into the sound-ranging set GR3, which in turn fathered the passive, acoustic sensors still used by modern armies to locate snipers and artillery. The SCR-584's mortar tracking mode prefigured the AN-TPQ-36 and TPQ-37 firefinder radars that today scan the skies over contested zones, ready to compute a firing point from the first arc of a hostile shell. And the VT proximity fuse, guarded as one of the war's deepest secrets, permanently abolished the sanctuary of open-topped trenches and reverse-slope hides. When the guns fell silent in the Ardennes, a new truth had been written in the frozen earth. The battlefield had expanded into the invisible spectrum of infrasound and radio waves. From that point forward, no foxhole, no defilade, no cloak of fog could offer genuine invisibility if the enemy possessed the scientific means to listen. The men of Battery B, 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion, many of whom lie today under the white marble at Henri-Chapelle, did not live to see the victory their work enabled. But every modern counter-battery system, every sensor-triggered strike, is a direct descendant of that moment when physics went to war in the Belgian winter and the German mortar loophole was forever erased. What remains for us is not just a story of technology, but a philosophical question that still echoes in the staff colleges of today. When war is waged in spectrums beyond human perception, what becomes of the soldier's oldest ally, the concealment of terrain? We invite you to share your reflections below.